My name's Todd Riley. I'm a designer at Jibo. Today I want to talk to you about designing new things, particularly the role that design plays in companies that are creating unprecedented experiences. I've been fortunate enough to design for smartwatches, augmented and virtual reality displays, and now social robots. And what I want to do is share some of my lessons learned from what some of these great design teams do when they work in this space. But first, I want to talk to you about something that makes most people feel uncomfortable, which is the idea of uncertainty. If you work in a startup or work on a project within an organization with one of these new technologies, you work with a great deal of unknowns. Unproven user needs, unknown technical constraints, an unclear vision of what the final product will be. Maybe there's an unproven business model in a lot of these cases. It can be complex, it can be confusing, it can be disheartening, it can be scary. What I want to talk to you about is how to embrace that uncertainty and how to deal with it through the use of design, and how design can play a role in helping these companies reduce their uncertainty, ultimately in making better decisions. So what is it that these companies do so well, that these design teams do so well in these companies? Well, the number one hallmark of a good design team is that they create clarity. In the face of uncertainty and complexity, when needs are unproven, and the technical constraints are unknown, and the vision is evolving, design teams can ease that anxiety through their work. They can foster a clear understanding of the problem. They create a clear vision through their prototypes, mock-ups, and other visual artifacts of what the company intends to build to solve that problem. In the early phases of a product, or of a company even, clarity is the responsibility of the designer. So, how do you get to that clarity? For starters, ask a lot of questions. Ask an obnoxious amount of questions. And don't be afraid to start with the obvious ones. What are we building? Why are we building it? Who do we think will use it? How and how often will they use it? How are we going to make their lives better? All of these things you should continue to ask as you get deeper and deeper to the core of the opportunity, to the core of the problem you're trying to solve. You know, it's really easy to get excited about new technologies in this space around, smart glasses and watches and robots, because of the novelty, right? It's exciting. But it's a dangerous game. It can lead companies failing because they're creating cool solutions that aren't needed or wanted. Great demos. But this is where design teams should be able to reduce that risk as they get to the core of what they're doing and why they're doing it through good questions. So your design team should be pushing for better questions. Let's talk about a quick example from my career. It's not just about answers, but knowing the right questions to ask. In fact, I would say that many of these technologies we're talking about today, we haven't even seen some of the great breakthroughs we've been hoping for, particularly with glasses and even VR, simply because the right questions haven't been asked yet. It's my opinion. So let's talk about that example I mentioned. Here's one from Jibo. We talk about bringing people together with a magical character experience. Design teams create clarity with these types of deliverables, with these types of missions, by creating visuals that show, that demonstrate that vision through these unambiguous mock-ups and diagrams that everyone in the company can understand and adopt. They create and validate prototypes that give a glimpse of what the future, or multiple versions of the future, could look like before even a line of code is written. It brings project plans, mission statements, requirement lists, documents like that to life, making them easy to understand. Again, it's about reducing uncertainty and waste. It's so critical in unproven competitive markets. So, in this example of Jibo, there's no mention of robots, there's no features. It's simple, it's memorable, it's concrete, it gives us focus. It helps us make hard decisions, like which features to prioritize. It helps us think more creatively as a design team because we have that clear intent in mind. When presented with 20 features we could design, we can just design those features, or we can take this clear goal and figure out exactly what are the right ones to build. It's about building the right products. What else do design teams do? Well, they're fast. They embrace failure. They explore many solutions through improving and learning and adapting. This is standard stuff in design. Everybody knows this. But it's particularly important with unproven technologies because chances are that first plan, that first concept, that first idea is going to be wrong. The first few are going to be wrong. Design allows you to explore and validate many possible futures before any code is written, before anything is built, before any investments are made. Design can get way out in front and explore and prove out your solutions. It doesn't take geniuses, it takes curiosity and it takes hard work. So how do you do this? Start from your purpose that you identified in that previous step when you ask those good questions. That's your blue dot here. And where you want to go from is you want to do the thing that's on the right there, right? Exploring many solutions at an early stage. It's not just different variations of the same concept of varying visual styles, but fundamentally different concepts. This is what you need to do in the face of uncertainty. If things were predictable, you could just build one thing and that would be completely fine. You can move forward because it's predictable. You're building tables and chairs, you know exactly what you're doing. But when you're building a robot experience, designing a robot experience, you can't do things that way. So instead, you have to, get out in front, explore as many solutions as possible. It's basic, design thinking kind of stuff, but it's absolutely critical when you're breaking new ground in design. And then when you come up with one solution, it's a good shot, it's wrong, as I've mentioned. So this is about casting a wider net, increasing your chances, hedging your bets. It's faster and safer, which doesn't happen much, and it ultimately results in a better answer, faster. Here's something we created while I was at Apex Labs, a enterprise wearables company down in DC. We're creating a software platform for smart glasses and smart watches. It's in use at Boeing today, in fact. Structured Brainstorm. This is intentionally hard to read. We were looking at 11 markets. We identified over 75 user needs across those markets, 75 unique strategies for solving those user needs, and ultimately 20 unique augmented reality applications to support those needs. Going through this practice, which only took a few days, gave us an incredible amount of ideas to analyze, weed out, select from, prototype, and even build. What else do designers do? Well, they create familiarity. This is a fun one, and one that I think is particularly important when designing new products and experiences. You're not just dealing with high uncertainty in your organization, like I've been talking about, but you're also dealing with high anxiety in the minds of your users. This is so critical that designers need to embrace this, knowing that they're creating anxiety for their users, and need to find ways to reduce that uncertainty so that people feel comfortable and familiar with what they're doing. This sounds silly, but tech moves quick, and people evolve very slowly. New tech is exciting. It moves super fast and it gets into the unfamiliar, and it's what we're all comfortable with. But for people, they need things ground down in the familiar, and the novelty of the device you're supplying, for example, it has to be offset. Has to be offset with some grounding of familiarity. And the cool thing, when it comes to designing for these new technologies, the design principles are the same, right? For example, you still need good feedback, good visual feedback, good error messaging. These things still matter, even if you're designing for a robot or a smartwatch, right? No matter the tech, it's the same design process, it's the same design principles in play. Of course, Apple comes to mind with this, doing things the right way here, where they create something like, when they came out with the iPhone or the image of the iPad here, and you do something like pinch to zoom. It was unfamiliar, but as soon as you saw it, you knew it, right? Something inherently human about being a human interacting in the world. You just understood what that interaction was. It was easy to build a mental model around it, right? It sort of kind of felt like how you interact in the world. It's like stretching something out or squeezing it in, right? When you create these kinds of UI patterns, you can do something that's totally innovative, but still familiar at the same time, right? So really what you're looking for are these interesting, surprisingly familiar, ownable UI patterns. And this is really going to reduce the friction of your users. Things that they can either stumble upon and discover on their own, or learn through doing, or learn through the product somehow. But once they get it, right? And once they get comfortable, they learn the rules, and users become confident and productive and comfortable, and friction just reduces. And they don't have that feeling of anxiety and uncertainty where they say, oh, I know that I'm using this, pair of smart glasses I've never worn before, but I get it. This feels comfortable. This feels like something I've done before, right? So let's talk about an example from Apex that I did. We created a solution for a wide range of our enterprise clients. Boeing is actually using something very similar to this today. What you have is this touchpad on the side of Google Glass, and we designed these menus so that as you slid your finger on the touchpad, you felt as though the icons were sliding on a rail as you slid your finger. That circle in the center would stay fixed. That's your selection point, and you'd slide this rail back and forth. That felt as though, you can't see in this image, but it felt as though it extended out to the right and wrapped around as though it was connected to your glasses. And that just gave people this very real, comfortable feeling. They were able to build an easy mental model around that. Here's one from Jibo. In order to get Jibo's attention, you say, "Hey Jibo," and he lights up. And he lights up sort of literally and metaphorically. The eye lights up, he makes a sound of energy coming on, his light ring lights up. His eye is the white circle in the center there. It's as though all of Jibo glows when you say hi to him. Now, that's not something that is familiar at all, that you've ever done before if you haven't interacted with this robot. However, it feels familiar enough. It feels like a cousin of the situation that happens when you call someone's name and their face sort of lights up, that they're through these subtle human movements, behaviors, it's very clear to know that you have that person's attention. Well, we don't have the ability to be as subtle when it comes to a robot, but we still want to mimic that feeling of, oh, I got this thing's attention because he glowed, he lit up, and he made this light up sort of sound. And it becomes just sort of second nature immediately. Next rule. Design teams create simple rules. When I'm talking about rules, I'm talking about things that users need to remember to interact with your product successfully. Think of things like "Hey Siri" to get Siri's attention, swipe to scroll, buttons that look like buttons, and menus that look familiar like menus across the system. There's sort of few simple rules that people can kind of grab onto that just have good affordances, right? Where they say, oh, I get this. I know that's a button, that's a menu. In this system, I don't have to remember too much. It just feels simple. It's about reducing friction. Where it's not simple is when you have to have multiple touch points in your product. I've dealt with a lot of this where you have a product that spans a mobile device or a wearable, web, and there's all these different touch points. So you have to have slightly different interaction models across all of these things. It's where it becomes particularly important to really keep the rules simple. You keep the iconography simple, you keep the color patterns simple, where there's just fewer and fewer things that a user has to remember because of the complexity of that user experience. So a great design team understands this. This is about holistic design. What I have here, I know this graphic might look a little silly, it is the idea that you're trying to create users of your system, particularly when you have multiple touch points. Users are going to have one user experience, period. Even if you have mobile and web and a wearable and a robot, whatever it is, they're going to have one experience with your product, right? They're experiencing the thing on the left, generally. Unfortunately, what a lot of people create is the thing on the right. They create what feels as though multiple products that, yeah, they may have the same brand associated with them and they may interconnect with each other, but it's this fragmented mess. I think users are particularly sensitive to this kind of thing. And you have to plan your product, engineer your product, design your product with the thing on the left in mind, that users are experiencing one holistic version of your product. Across devices and platforms, it really needs to be a common design language, common interaction design patterns, common visual style, common icons and terminology. The users need to feel like they're having that one single experience. This might take a little, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of management. It takes a lot of people that are kind of sitting across different touch points. But the work it takes to kind of get this right is absolutely critical and necessary if you want to create great experiences for complex systems. So fewer patterns and rules, less unique things to design and build leads to greater adaptability. That's the genius in all of this, which is that if you keep things simple on the design and engineering side, it's easier to build, it's easier to design, and ultimately that makes it easier to make changes because there's sort of fewer unique pieces. And ultimately, your users are going to have greater experience. There's kind of less for them to learn and understand. It feels more cohesive and holds together better. Everybody wins. Finally, design, particularly the type of design we're talking about, is extremely humbling. The best designers I've been around are the most humble and curious ones. They're the ones that understand that the design can always be better, that assumptions can always be tested. that the people using your product are all that matters. And as long as they're not perfectly satisfied, the work's not done. So, this is where that strong intent matters. That's where that fast iteration matters, leaving yourself space to adjust. This is where focus on the right purpose, on building the right product, but building in sort of flexibility and scalability into your design. It's where that important sort of strategy, the holistic view, that architecture becomes increasingly important. This is also you can continue to learn and adapt and evolve, because ultimately when you're designing for new products, you're going to be wrong once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. And it really takes hard work and curiosity and iteration to get it right. So again, I just want to bring it back. This is about embracing uncertainty and designing as though you're expecting uncertainty, and knowing that you're going to have to get it wrong before you get it right, and knowing that you're going to have to iterate. And you do this through building clarity, going fast, creating familiarity, creating simplicity, and ultimately constantly learning. And honestly, this is a lot of fun. It's hard work, but it's a lot of fun in this space. And with that, thank you. And that's all.